The chill in the air is different here, in New Hampshire, where the cold feels as if it has been here longer than time itself, as though it has absorbed the whispers of the forgotten and the unseen. It is a place where the fog does not simply drift, but seems to move with a purpose, as though it remembers something from a time long past, something it is unwilling to share. The woods are silent, unnaturally so. The land holds its breath, as if it too knows the stories buried within its soil. In this quiet, the people who live near these forests speak less, as if every word spoken could disturb the eerie peace, as if they know something that no one should ever hear. And the truth is, in New Hampshire, these are not just stories, they are facts. The kind of facts that do not get published in newspapers, but are instead hidden away, filed under cold case reports, beneath names scratched out and graves unmarked. Stories of missing people. Stories of unsolved murders. Stories of encounters with the inexplicable. These are not just the whispered tales shared over a campfire or in the corners of small-town bars. These are the kind of stories that echo through basements, snow-covered trails, and sealed roads. The kind that are etched into tombstones that do not match the official records. Some of these stories were buried on purpose. Others were never meant to be found at all. But despite every effort to silence them, they rise. This episode will take you through some of New Hampshire's darkest and most chilling tales, where reality blurs into the unknown and no one, not even the authorities, can offer an explanation. So turn off the lights, pull the blanket up tight, and put on your headphones, because after tonight, you won't look at the cold silence the same way again. Mystery number 1: the Exat UFO incident, a night that defied explanation. It was a night that began like any other, with the quiet darkness of rural New Hampshire stretching across Route 150. The kind of night where the stars shine brighter than they have any right to, and the only sound is the occasional creak of trees swaying in the cold wind. But on September 3rd, 1965, something disrupted that peace. And it was not just the rustle of leaves or the whisper of animals moving in the distance. It was something that, for the people who witnessed it, would change their understanding of the world forever. It started just before 2:00 a.m., when a teenager named Norman Muscarella found himself hitchhiking along that empty stretch of road, heading home after a late night. The only thing surrounding him was the cold, dark expanse, just fields, woods, and an old barn sitting quietly in the distance. As he walked, something in the sky caught his eye. At first, it was just a flicker, but then it grew larger, brighter. A massive object, silent, hovering just above the trees. 5 red lights. 5 pulsating red lights, so bright they illuminated the barn and the surrounding field as if it were midday. But the most disturbing thing, Norman would later say, was the complete silence. No engine, no hum, no blades cutting through the air. Just a presence. Watching. His heart pounded as the object hovered overhead, its eerie glow casting strange shadows on the ground. Norman said it felt as though the light itself was alive, pressing against his skin like heat without warmth. Paralyzed by fear, he dropped to the ground, trying to make himself as small as possible, praying it would not see him. Then, without a sound, the object vanished. Frozen in terror, Norman did the only thing he could think of. He ran straight to the Exat police station. Breathless and panicked, he explained to the officer on duty what he had seen. He was not drunk, he was not confused, he was terrified, and he knew what he had seen was something that could not be explained away. Officer Eugene Bertrand listened intently, and when Norman finished, he surprised him with a statement that would set the town's pulse racing. "You are not the first one tonight," he said. Earlier that evening, another woman had come to the station, frantic and shaken. She too had seen a large, silent craft hovering low over the road, just as Norman described. She had stopped her car in fear and watched in disbelief as the object silently hovered above. At the time, Officer Bertrand had written it off. But now, hearing Norman's description, he could not ignore the growing sense of unease that gripped him. Without wasting any time, Officer Bertrand drove Norman back to the field, bringing along backup in the form of Officer David Hunt. The three of them stood in the darkness, the only sound the occasional barking of dogs and the distant whinny of horses. The air was still, oppressive, as though the night itself held its breath. Then they saw it. The object reappeared, low in the sky, moving slowly and deliberately toward them. Its 5 red lights burned through the darkness, but still, there was no sound. No hum, no engine, nothing to explain its presence. The officers, trained to observe and to protect, drew their weapons, their fingers tight on the triggers. Officer Bertrand shouted, "Hit the ground," and they did. They lay flat, as the object hovered above them, watching, waiting. The tension in the air was unbearable, as though time itself had stopped. Then, without warning, the craft shot up into the sky, vanishing into the night. The officers filed their official reports that night, and the Air Force, which had been monitoring unusual reports from around the country, sent in investigators. But their explanation, once it arrived, was one that only fueled the anger and disbelief of the town. "You saw stars. Or maybe reflections from nearby commercial aircraft," they were told. Stars. Aircraft. The kind of explanation that might make sense to someone who had never stood beneath the light of something so alien, so terrifying. But not to the officers. Not to Norman. Not to anyone who had witnessed what had happened that night. The town of Exat was furious. The story hit the Boston Globe, the New York Times, and other newspapers. The Air Force closed its investigation under the label "No Unusual Activity Found," but despite that, something within the town refused to let it go. Dr. G. Alan Henniker, the Air Force's own scientific consultant, eventually visited Exat, admitting that this was one of the few UFO cases he found credible. Yet, the official stance of the military remained unchanged. What the officers had seen was nothing out of the ordinary. To this day, no one has explained what Norman and the officers witnessed. The lights that hovered over that barn, the silence that seemed to pull the very sound from the air, remain a mystery. And every September, the town of Exat holds a small festival not to celebrate aliens, but to remember that no one believed them. Not even those who had seen it for themselves. Some things descend from the sky, but others, perhaps, rise from the ground. Mystery number 2: The Haunted House of Oceanborn Mary, the voice beneath the floor. In a quiet corner of New Hampshire, there stands a house that holds more than just the weight of time. The stones and timber that make up its walls are steeped in history, but it is the memory within that lingers, as if it is trapped in the very foundation. This is the House of Oceanborn Mary, a name that echoes with legend, but what is truly terrifying about this house is not the name, it is the voice that rises from beneath the floorboards. The house itself was built on a quiet hill in Henniker, New Hampshire, a colonial structure from the early 18th century, crafted from stone and wood. The house earned its name from the remarkable tale of Mary, a woman born at sea during an attack by pirates in 1720. She survived, grew old, and died peacefully, or so the story goes. But though she lived her life quietly, the whispers about her did not end with her death. They were just the beginning. Locals say that Mary's ghost does not roam the halls of the house, but something else does: a voice. A voice that comes from the cellar. And it speaks, always when no one else is around. The first known account of this came from a woman who moved into the house in 1885. As she cleaned the cellar, she heard it, a low, clear voice coming from below the floorboards. That is enough now. Terrified, she dropped her broom and never returned to that room again. But she was not the last to hear it. Over the years, others who lived in or visited the house have described strange occurrences: footsteps pacing beneath the house, chairs scraping across the cellar floor when no one was near, the unmistakable scent of salt water and pipe smoke, and of course, the voice that always seemed to speak when no one was there to answer. In the 1970s, a group of paranormal investigators brought audio equipment to the house, hoping to capture anything that would explain the strange happenings. As they set up their equipment in the basement, they began recording static, the soft shuffle of unseen footsteps, and then silence. But then, just as the quiet seemed to consume everything, they heard it, a faint whisper, so clear it sent chills down their spines. "I know you can hear me." Skeptics would later claim it was just the creaking of old wood, the house settling, the wind moving through the pipes. But those who have been inside, especially those who have listened closely, know differently. The voice is intelligent. It does not simply repeat words. It responds to what is happening in the room. One of the most disturbing accounts occurred when a young visitor dared the voice to speak again. "If you are really there, say something," she challenged, her voice daring. To her horror, the voice responded immediately, "Don't ask again." The girl ran out of the house, trembling, and did not speak for 2 days. Some say the voice belongs to Mary herself, that she is still guarding her house from beyond the grave. But others believe the voice is not hers at all. They say it belongs to a pirate, one of the men who had spared her life during the attack at sea. This pirate, some believe, swore to protect her even in death, and that promise lingers within the walls of the house. There is also a darker theory. Some believe the voice did not come from any person at all, but grew from the very silence of the house, fed by the attention it receives, stirred by the disbelief of those who live there or visit. And that silence, thick as water and cold as stone, pulses with an energy that cannot be explained. Today the house still stands. The stones and would have endured, the windows now dark, the doors bolted shut. Yet visitors who dare enter still speak of a strange pressure in the air, a thickening around them as they near the basement stairs. It is as if the house itself watches them, waiting for the right moment. And when you near the cellar, the silence becomes heavy. You feel at first a shift in the air, an almost oppressive stillness that fills your chest, makes your skin crawl. And then you hear it, the voice, low and calm, just beneath your feet. Don't go further. Some say the voice speaks with the intent to warn, to protect. Others believe it is a reminder reminding those who enter that they are not alone, that the house remembers, and perhaps it is better to leave the past buried. Mystery number 3: Mount Washington Disappearances, the trail that ends in nothingness. Mount Washington, the highest peak in the northeastern United States, is a towering giant that looms over the land, its 6,288 feet of jagged rock and snow-capped summits often obscured by swirling mists. Known for its brutal weather winds that can reach hurricane force and temperatures that plummet so sharply they cut through clothing like broken glass, this mountain has a reputation for unpredictability. It is a place where nature's fury is unleashed in a way that few other places in the world can match. But it is not just the extreme weather that makes Mount Washington so dangerous. It is something else, something far more chilling. For decades, people have gone up the mountain, prepared for the harsh elements and the treacherous trails. Some return, others do not. And what is more disturbing than the missing hikers are the stories that follow them. Stories of hikers who vanish not in the dead of night, not in the midst of a blizzard, but on clear days, in broad daylight, on well-marked trails. They simply disappear. The trail ends. Their footprints stop, as if they have been erased from existence. One of the most haunting disappearances occurred in 1981, when James Tedford, a seasoned hiker, set out for Mount Washington with all the right supplies, a map, a compass, 2 days' worth of food, and enough experience to handle the mountain's trials. When he checked in at the visitor station, everything seemed normal. He showed his gear, got his permit, and made his way up the mountain. But when search teams found his tent that evening, the scene was nothing short of unnerving. The tent was undisturbed. His fire was still burning low, casting flickering shadows on the snow. His bag was still zipped up, with his belongings neatly inside. Yet there was no sign of James. The only clue was the tracks leading away from the tent. But as search teams followed the trail, it abruptly ended. No more footprints. No sign of struggle. No body. The snow had swallowed his presence, and with it, any explanation of what happened. More disappearances followed. In 1990, a group of 3 hikers, all experienced and well-prepared, vanished into the mountain. When they were found, they were confused, disoriented, and claimed they had walked in a straight line. Yet they were less than a mile from their original path. Something had happened to them, something that erased their sense of direction, making them lose track of where they were. The mountain had played with their minds, distorting their reality. In 2008, a solo hiker radioed for help, saying his GPS was malfunctioning and that he had seen strange lights above the ridge. By the time rescuers arrived, the signal was gone, and the hiker was never found. His last words on the radio, "Something's wrong." Locals who have lived near Mount Washington for years will tell you the mountain has a way of choosing its victims. It does not take anyone by accident. It picks them. Skeptics will explain it away as the result of hypothermia, disorientation from the high altitude, or the confusion that can set in when you are lost in the wilderness. But those explanations fail to account for the silence. Search and rescue workers, when they are asked about the mountain, won't go into much detail. But if you press them, they will tell you the same thing. There is something about Mount Washington that is different. Something about certain spots on the mountain that feel wrong. They call it the shelf. The shelf is a stretch of terrain on the mountain where more people have disappeared than anywhere else on the peak. And it is not just the missing hikers that are eerie. Search dogs won't go near it. They refuse to move past certain points, even when led by experienced handlers. Some rescuers claim it is like walking into a soundproof box. One moment you are in the world, and the next the world goes silent. It is as if the mountain itself has swallowed all the noise, leaving only an oppressive, suffocating quiet. And when you take one more step into that silence, everything stops. The world, the sounds, the wind, it all vanishes. The air thickens, and the pressure builds, as if the mountain is squeezing the life out of you. It is a sensation that cannot be ignored. It is a warning, not in words, but in the gut-wrenching, unnatural stillness that envelopes you. For experienced hikers, Mount Washington is a challenge. It is a peak that demands respect and preparation. But even they carry a warning with them when they make the trek. The locals will tell you, if you ever hear nothing on the mountain, turn back. Because nothing is worse than the silence that comes before it. When Mount Washington decides you are not coming back, it does not change its mind. It chooses, and once it does, there is no turning around. Mystery number 4: The Hollow Church of Gone. Voices that answer before you speak. There are places where the air seems to hold something, a presence, a weight that can't be explained by the physical world. The Hollow Church of Gone, a crumbling building nestled deep in the hills of Goshen, New Hampshire, is one of those places. From the outside, it appears to be nothing more than an abandoned structure, weather-worn and forgotten, its steeple cracked, windows boarded up, and bells silent for more than 50 years. Yet within, the air hums with a strange energy, something that cannot be touched or seen, but is felt by all who dare to enter. Locals refer to it as the Hollow Church not because it has been abandoned, but because of what happens when you step inside. It is not just the oppressive silence that settles around you, or the thick smell of old wood and dust. No, the true horror of the Hollow Church is what happens when you speak. Or rather, what happens when you do not speak. The first known accounts of strange happenings inside the church date back to the late 1960s, when a group of teenagers broke in on a dare. As they wandered through the sanctuary, their voices filled the empty air. It was a simple echo until something else happened. Footsteps, they claimed, sounded behind them, even when they were standing still. But the most disturbing thing was the voices. They were not echoes of their own words. They were something else, something that seemed to know what they were going to say before they said it. It was not long before the stories began to spread. Photographers, hikers, and curious locals, all who ventured inside, left with similar tales. Voices that were not their own. Whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. But no matter how many people entered the church, the voices never stopped. In 1973, a university audio technician named Robert C. Langley, intrigued by the stories, decided to bring sound equipment to the church to investigate. He stood at the pulpit and spoke into the empty air, his voice carrying in the stillness. "I do not believe this," he said, his words testing the church's reputation. What came back was not a mere echo, a reflection of sound bouncing back. No, this response was different. It came too quickly, too sharply. It was not a repeat of his words. It was a response. The voice simply said, "Then leave." Langley was startled. His equipment did not pick up any distortion, reverb, or interference, as it should have in a typical echo. Instead, it registered nothing, no wave bounce, no reverb at all. It was as though the church swallowed the sound whole and responded with something entirely its own. Over the years, the church's unsettling nature only deepened. More researchers visited, drawn by the strange accounts, eager to capture what others had heard. Acousticians, paranormal groups, and historians all walked into the Hollow Church, all with the same expectation, to find an explanation. What they found, however, only deepened the mystery. Each left with more unanswered questions and the same disturbing experiences. One visitor in the early 1980s, an experienced investigator, described feeling like he was one sentence behind. Every time he spoke, the air seemed to respond before he finished his words. His questions were met with a reply before the sentence was even completed. It was as though the church itself was alive, anticipating what he would say, as though it could read his thoughts. The most unsettling account came in 1995. A man, alone in the church, sat quietly in one of the pews for just a few minutes. When he was about to leave, he heard a voice that made his blood run cold. It was his mother's voice, soft and familiar, calling his name from the back of the church. His mother had died years earlier. With a chill creeping over him, he turned, his heart racing, but there was no one there. No one at all. He left the church immediately, shaken to his core, and never spoke of it again. The church's sinister reputation continued to grow as more strange incidents occurred. In 2008, a woman and her husband visited the church while on a hiking trip. They were not expecting anything out of the ordinary, just curious about the strange stories surrounding the place. As they walked down the center aisle, they decided to test the acoustics of the space by whispering questions aloud. They asked, "Why are you still here?" The air grew thick, and the silence stretched longer than it should have. There was no immediate response, and they began to think the church was just another empty building. But when they returned home and played back their recording, they heard something chilling. A voice, calm, low, immediate, cut in just before their question was finished, because you asked. Skeptics would argue that the strange sounds could be attributed to the warped wood of the church, or perhaps the wind slipping through the cracks at just the right frequency. But acousticians who have studied the building's design say otherwise. They assert that the church's structure should not produce responses so specific, so tailored to the person speaking. Echoes do not predict questions. They do not finish sentences before they are said. The hollow church still stands today, with its peeling paint, missing crosses, and boarded-up windows. The door is chained shut from the outside, but there are rumors that every few years, always someone curious, always someone daring will find a way back inside. And every time, the stories return. One final account, filed by a local man in 2008, detailed how, while walking near the church, he heard faint voices coming from the trees. Not behind him, not ahead of him, but beside him. The voices were not those of strangers, but of people who knew him, who walked alongside him, who waited for him to answer. And when he walked closer to the church, the voices fell silent, waiting for the next question to be asked. Mystery number 5: The Barebrook Murders, a killer with no name. Some mysteries are buried so deeply that it seems like they will never resurface, tucked away in the past, where they can rot in silence. But other mysteries, they refuse to stay buried. They claw their way to the surface, pushing against the weight of time and secrecy. The Barebrook Murders, a case that began in the woods of Barebrook State Park in New Hampshire, are one such mystery. It is a case that spans decades, filled with names that should not exist, a killer who left no trace, and bodies that waited years to be identified. The story begins on a quiet trail in the park, a place that many hikers passed by without a second thought. The woods were peaceful, serene, with only the occasional snap of a twig or rustle of leaves disturbing the calm. But in 1985, hikers in Barebrook State Park came across an old metal barrel tipped over in the brush. When one of them kicked it, it did not sound empty. Inside the barrel were 2 bodies, one adult woman and one young girl. Both were badly decomposed, wrapped in plastic, and left to rot in the woods. There were no identification marks on either body, no fingerprints, no missing persons reports that matched their descriptions. The police had nothing to go on. But that did not stop them from trying. The woman and child were buried as Jane does, and the case went cold, left to languish in the background of a small town's records. Years passed. Life in Allentown went on, but the mystery never left. The woods were quiet again, but the barrel still stood there, a silent reminder of the evil that had been hidden for so long. And then in 2000, a strange twist brought the case back into the light. Another barrel was discovered, just a short distance from the first. Same type of barrel, same condition inside were 2 more bodies, both young girls, both killed in the same manner. This time, the case did not go cold. The police investigated, using age progression sketches and DNA testing, hoping for a breakthrough. But for decades, nothing came. There were no new leads. The killer had vanished without a trace, and the bodies, still nameless, remained buried in the earth. It was not until 2017 that the case finally took a turn. Forensic genealogists, using DNA recovered from the bodies, were able to track down the identity of the adult woman. Her name was Marlis Honeychurch. She had been last seen in the 1980s, with a man who was known to be a drifter, a manipulator, a man who changed his name as easily as he changed his life. He went by many aliases over the years, but eventually, investigators discovered his real name, Terry Peter Rasmussen. Rasmussen had a trail of victims that stretched across multiple states, multiple families, and multiple lives. But even with this revelation, the mystery did not end. While Marlis and the girl buried with her were finally identified, the 2 young girls in the second barrel remained a mystery. Their names, their origins, their lives gone, lost to time. Some believe they were children of another woman Rasmussen killed. Others think he kidnapped them, raised them, and then murdered them. But the truth remains as elusive as the killer himself. It is one of the most chilling aspects of the case, the second barrel. If it had not been found, if those 2 young girls had been left undiscovered, Rasmussen might have escaped with all of it. The bodies, the mystery, the lives lost forever. But instead, the killer was exposed and his grisly trail was uncovered piece by piece. Today, Barebrook State Park looks peaceful again. Families walk the trails. Children run past the spot where the barrels once stood. There is a small marker now, placed near the site, to honor the victims. But the ghosts of the Barebrook murders still linger. 2 of the 4 victims remain unidentified, their identities a puzzle that no one can solve. Bones. DNA. No birthdays. No schools. No names. And the worst part, if not for the second barrel, the killer would have gotten away with it all. Some killers leave no messages behind. They leave no clues, no fingerprints, no signatures. Instead, they leave puzzles scattered across time, pieces that do not fit, and some pieces that will never come back. The Barebrook murders, for all the attention they have garnered, still have questions left unanswered. How many lives did Terry Rasmussen destroy? How many more names are lost to the darkness? And what happened to the children, the 2 who remain nameless, their identities swallowed by the earth and time? In a world where justice often seems out of reach, the truth of Barebrook remains a reminder. Some monsters leave no names. Some leave no footprints. And their victims are left to be forgotten, scattered like pieces in a puzzle that will never be solved. Mystery number 6: The Woman in Blue of Route 26. A ghost that prevents tragedy. There is a stretch of road in northern New Hampshire, one that seems so ordinary, so mundane, that most travelers pass by without a second thought. But those who drive it late at night, those who find themselves on the Dixville curve just before hitting Route 26, may find themselves questioning reality in ways they never expected. Because if you are unlucky enough to be on that stretch at the wrong moment, you might just see her. The woman in blue. She wears a light blue dress, mid-century in style, her long dark hair falling softly around her face, barefoot, her expression vacant as she stands just off the edge of the road watching. The first known report of her came in 1972, after a fatal crash that left 1 man alive and a passenger dead. The survivor told EMTs, his voice shaky, there was a woman in the road. I swerved to avoid her, but there was no body, no sign of anyone, just me and my dead passenger. At first, the story seemed impossible. A woman in the middle of the road, one who could not be seen by anyone but the driver. But as the years passed, more and more stories began to surface, all with a chilling similarity. Truckers, travelers, state troopers, each of them spoke of a woman dressed in blue, standing on the side of the road, watching. She never moved. She never walked into the path of a car. She simply stood there, her presence unsettling, as if waiting for something or someone. In 1989, a logging truck flipped on that same curve. The driver survived, barely, but later told investigators he had seen the woman moments before the turn. He was not sure if she was in the road or standing in the trees, but what struck him most was that when he looked at her, she blinked. That one action, so subtle, so human, but impossible. Investigations into the curve did not reveal much. The area had seen more than its fair share of accidents over the years, but nothing specific to the woman in blue. However, what was more unsettling than the accidents was the growing number of survivors who reported strange memories of the moments leading up to their crashes. Some could remember nothing at all, just a sudden feeling of confusion, of being lost in time. Others, though, had vivid recollections of the woman, watching silently, as if she was the last thing they saw before the impact. And there is a detail about these sightings that makes everything even stranger: she never moves. She is never seen walking, never running, never in the middle of the road or on the other side of it. She is always just standing there, waiting, her back to the trees, her hands folded in front of her, as if she has been standing there for hours or years. She never looks at the driver, never approaches the car. She is just there watching, waiting. Perhaps the most disturbing encounter came in 2005. A woman and her husband were driving along Route 26, making their way home after a long day. As they approached the Dixville curve, the woman, sitting in the passenger seat, leaned forward, staring into the distance. She whispered, "Slow down. She is here." Her husband glanced at her, confused, then followed her gaze. He did not see anything, but he slowed the car down anyway. Moments later, a deer bolted across the road, only just missing the car. Had he not slowed down, they would have hit the animal at full speed, likely causing a deadly crash. Was it coincidence, or was the woman in blue somehow warning them, just as she had warned others before them? No one can say for sure. But one thing remains clear: those who see her, those who acknowledge her presence, often find themselves avoiding disaster. In 2018, another man driving alone along the same stretch of road claimed to have seen her just before the curve. But this time, something far more unsettling happened. As he turned the corner and glanced in his rearview mirror, he saw her. She was sitting in the back seat of his car, just for a brief second, and then, as quickly as she appeared, she was gone. Skeptics, of course, attribute these sightings to nothing more than fatigue, headlights playing tricks, or the fog that often clings to the road in the late hours. But ask any local mechanic who tows cars off Route 26, and they will tell you the same thing. Every single person who crashes there says the same thing. They saw someone they could not explain. And it is not just the accidents themselves that are strange. It is the fact that the woman in blue does not seem to be a residual haunting. She is not a ghost trapped in a loop, doomed to replay the same tragic moment. No, there is something else about her, something different. Those who encounter her feel that she is waiting for something, a moment, a warning, a reminder of what has happened and what is still to come. The woman in blue of Route 26 is not asking for help. She is not lost or searching for closure. She is waiting for something. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part of all. For now, the road remains open. The curve still sits, as it always has, at the edge of the highway, and the sign still stands, weathered and worn. But locals know better. They know that if you see her, do not stop. Don't wave. Don't even meet her eyes. Because she is not asking for help. She is remembering what happened, and what is about to happen again. New Hampshire is a state known for its quiet beauty, its peaceful woods, and its tranquil towns. Yet beneath the surface of this picturesque landscape lies a dark history, one of lost souls, unsolved mysteries, and unspeakable encounters that still haunt the region to this day. The stories of Exat, Oceanborn Mary, Mount Washington, the Hollow Church, the Barebrook murders, and the woman in blue, all of them converge in a place where reality and the supernatural bleed together, leaving more questions than answers. These are not the kind of stories you hear whispered over a campfire. These are not the kind of legends that fade with the years. They are the kind of stories that persist, that refuse to be forgotten, no matter how hard people try to bury them. Some mysteries descend from the sky. Some rise from the earth. Some are buried beneath the snow, waiting to be uncovered. And some simply wait for headlights to appear, hoping someone will be there to see them. Take, for instance, the events that unfolded in Exat, New Hampshire. The night that Norman Muscarella, Officer Eugene Bertrand, and Officer David Hunt encountered the mysterious craft with its 5 pulsating red lights, hovering in complete silence above the barn. The Air Force's explanation stars, reflections from aircraft, has done little to quell the anger and disbelief of those who witnessed it. For the people of Exat, the UFO incident is a reminder that not everything can be explained away with science or logic. Some things, no matter how hard we try, will never make sense. And then there is the haunting of Oceanborn Mary's house in Henniker, where the voice beneath the floorboards calls out to those who dare to enter. It does not matter how many times investigators visit, how many theories are proposed. The voice is still there, intelligent and elusive, responding to questions that have not been asked yet. Skeptics argue it is just the creaking of old wood, but the people who've spent time in the house know the truth. The voice does not belong to the house. It belongs to something else. And perhaps that is the real terror. The house has memories of its own, and it is not willing to let them go. Mount Washington, too, holds its share of unanswered questions. The disappearances on that peak, on clear days, under the most peaceful conditions. How does the trail simply end? What happens to those who vanish without a trace? There are theories: hypothermia, altitude sickness, disorientation. But none of them fully account for the eerie silence that surrounds the missing hikers, the strange, oppressive stillness that seems to swallow everything around them. And what of the shelf, a zone where no one goes willingly, a place where the mountain seems to choose its victims, where the air grows thick and the world goes quiet? What is it about that stretch of terrain that makes it so deadly? The Hollow Church of Gone, too, remains an enigma. The voices that speak before you even finish your question, the whispers that come from nowhere, the strange anticipation in the air. How is it possible for a building to respond to unspoken words, to predict what will be said before it is said? The acoustics do not add up. The wind does not make sense. And yet, every visitor who dares to walk through its doors leaves with the same unsettling experience. The church is not empty. Not by a long shot. And the questions it raises are not easily answered. The Barebrook murders, perhaps, are the most unsettling of all. For bodies: 2 women, 2 children found buried in metal barrels in Barebrook State Park. For decades, their identities remained unknown. And even now, with the killer's identity finally uncovered, the mystery of the 2 young girls in the second barrel remains unsolved. Who were they? Where did they come from? How many more victims did Terry Rasmussen leave in his wake? And most haunting of all, what if the second barrel had never been found? Would the world ever have known the truth? And then, there is the woman in blue of Route 26. A ghost who does not ask for help, who does not warn of impending danger, but simply stands and watches. She is a constant presence on that dark stretch of road, waiting for the right moment to reveal herself. Some say she is a residual haunting, a tragic figure doomed to repeat the same scene for eternity. Others believe she is more than that, something active, something that knows what is coming next. Is she simply a reminder of a tragic past, or does she have a greater purpose, one that still eludes us? As unsettling as these stories are, the true terror lies not in the events themselves, but in the unanswered questions they leave behind. Some mysteries may be solved in time, but others remain hidden in the shadows, forever elusive, forever beyond our understanding. They become part of the landscape, embedded in the very earth, the forests, the roads, and the buildings. New Hampshire's darkest mysteries are not stories of things that happened long ago. They are the things that are still happening, the things that are still waiting to be discovered. The woman in blue, the voices from the cellar, the UFOs in the night sky, these are not relics of the past. They are present, alive in the cold, silent places, waiting for the next person to stumble upon them. In New Hampshire, it is not the legends that scare you. It is the ones that never stopped happening. And the worst part, they might be happening right now, just waiting for you to find them.